let's move on. We want to get into what is one of the biggest stories on earth right now, and rightfully so. That's the ongoing protest movement in Iran, Trump's threats to strike Iran, Israeli threats that are sort of in the same vein, all the different things that are swirling around this, which, of course, in the midst of everything happening, I think around the globe, are just part of a very newsworthy week here that we're having. But we want to just get right into it here now. And to start our conversation off on this issue, we have Jamal Abdi, who's the president of the National Iranian American Council, with us. Jamal, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you here. Interesting poll that was circulating yesterday from Quinnipiac that I think it was some 70-some-odd% of people in the United States opposed Trump's sort of semi-announced plans to potentially bomb Iran, allegedly in support of the protest. And I guess I just wanted to start there to see, how do you evaluate Trump's he hasn't necessarily done anything yet in that sense, but at least rhetorical sense approach that he may take military action, and that in fact will be good for the people on the ground in Iran?
Yeah, what a surprise. Americans don't want to enter another open-ended regime change war in the Middle East. I don't know what's their problem. But so as far as Trump's rhetoric, like, he is telling people to go out into the streets, put their bodies on the line, and that help is on the way. And I think that, first of all, just putting aside what options the president has, if he's going to make a promise to people and people are going to go out and get killed, one would hope he would keep that promise. But that then leads to point number two, which is that there is no help that the United States can provide that would actually, I think, help the Iranian people, particularly if the idea is that they want a democracy that respects human rights. I don't know if you put together a list of people who should be considered eligible to transition a country to democracy and human rights. Donald Trump would probably be on the bottom of that list, given that he is defending security forces in the United States, shooting people in the face, given that he is disputing elections. I mean, this is the last guy who I would think is the savior of the Iranian people, or any people who want democracy and human rights. I think none of this negates the fact that that is what Iranians do want. But you have people like Trump, like some of these exile opposition leaders, who are trying to insert themselves. And what they're not doing is providing leadership for the Iranian people or even solidarity. They're providing co-option. And I think that's just deeply irresponsible.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen these reports basically from the Israelis kind of bragging, whether, it's exaggerated or not, bragging that they're involved and like they're helping arm protests and they want to cause destabilization and chaos. And then you've got a lot of really hawkish diaspora voices too, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, who are calling for bombing as well and claiming to represent the true desires of the Iranian people. And I think that puts, NIAC, the National Iranian American Council, which you represent, in a really unique position, because obviously, you all have expressed solidarity with protests and you want to see an Iran that has, more democracy, and, respects human rights in all the ways you wanted to, but you are firmly opposed to any sort of foreign U.S. military intervention. So I just kind of wanted to give you the opportunity to address that, the fact that, there are these diaspora voices that claim to speak on behalf of Iranians. You see them a lot, in LA, some of them coming out of Canada, claiming they want to see, the Shah's son in charge of Iran, and just, saying that Trump is doing the best thing ever and should bomb the country. What is your take on those voices?
Yeah, I think it's really also sad that Iranians are putting their lives on the line, have so few avenues to express themselves, to dissent, to organize. And then here outside of Iran, where we are free to organize and express our dissent and use our voices and try to build something, instead, we have some people who are more committed to attacking one another, to spreading disinformation online, and to just making this debate really about centering themselves at the expense of Iranians. I think when we talk about, there's this debate online. I don't know, I see a lot of people talking about the debate. I haven't seen the debate itself as much, but this notion that either you're on the side of standing up to colonialism and imperial powers and Israel and the United States, and you think the protests are fake, or you're on the side of the Iranian people and you want the U.S. to invade Iran. And I just think those are just gross misrepresentations of what is actually happening. Two things can be true. Iranians can be extremely frustrated and frankly done with having an Islamic Republic theocratic system that rules over every aspect of their lives and has mismanaged the country in so many ways. It's also true that Israel, and to a large extent the United States, has an interest in exploiting the feelings of the Iranian people, and frankly have had a role in manufacturing some of that. It's not just the Islamic Republic repressing internally. There is extra repression from the outside through these sanctions, through this pressure, these other measures that, again, you don't need to, you don't need to hear it from me. You listen to the people who created these policies. These are policies aimed at starving Iranians so that they turn out into the streets and call for regime change. But they're not aimed at helping Iran build a democracy internally by strengthening the people, by strengthening the middle class, by connecting Iranians with the rest of the world, by reducing the securitization of civil society inside of Iran. Instead, it's aimed at impoverishing people so that they are so weak relative to their government that they have to beg imperial powers to come in and save them, which is not how democracies get created. So I think there's a lot of ambivalence about what to think right now because we want to stand for the Iranian people. We want to do work in solidarity with them, but we also recognize that there is this campaign to undermine them. There's this campaign to co-opt their voices to serve interests of Israel and the United States. And there's a campaign online to try to position certain figures as the leaders of a movement where they haven't even been on the ground in Iran for decades. And I think that is also, I mean, as far as, claims of what's happening on the ground in Iran, clearly the protests have been more violent. There are claims that have gone back and forth. I think if any claims of outside interference or, sending arms in or anything like that, there needs to be an independent investigation. Otherwise, I'm not taking any of that at face value. I know that they're more violent. As far as any outside interference, there needs to be an independent investigation to get to the bottom of this. But we do know for a fact that the Israeli government is propping up Reza Pahlavi online through disinformation campaigns, through AI, sock puppet, bots. Haaretz has exposed this. Citizen Lab has exposed this. So these things are not a secret. And I think especially the media and the public needs to know about these things, but not allow that to then say we're going to ignore the voices of Iranians who have legitimate grievances and do deserve solidarity.
I think it's an interesting question that you're raising, and I think the point of it not really being a binary, I think looking especially in terms of what we know is attempting to be imposed from the outside on Iran, I mean, looking at the Iraq precedent, looking at the Libya precedent, I mean, in some degrees, you could even throw in a couple different other countries. I mean, how important is that Iranian voice as well? Because I think that there are people who are coming out into the streets. I mean, it's, presented as, in support of the government, quote unquote, which, it is in some ways, maybe not. But people who maybe fear what could come next and fear whatever grievances they may have with the Islamic Republic. Like, we're worried about where these protests are going, and thus we're going to stand on the other side of things, or at least the way that's presented. I mean, I think that's also an important perspective that we don't hear a lot about in the West, but seems relevant given what we've seen in the context of the region.
I think there is definitely a fear of instability. There have been chants for Reza Pahlavi, this, the opposition leader who hasn't been in the country for 40 years. I think a lot of that is just there are so few avenues to actually protest or dissent or make, it used to be elections even, as controlled as they are, people would turn out in the elections to be able to express themselves. And the turnout for the last few elections has been just abysmal compared to what it normally is. So the ability for Iranians to actually express themselves and to demand change is so limited that any option that is out there, people are going to end up grasping onto because they see, nothing but obstacles in their way. But that doesn't mean that people want to invite Benjamin Netanyahu in to be the viceroy of Iran or his emissary. And as far as the government, the pro-government protests, I mean, it's clearly a much different context. People are not showing up to these protests and, risking their lives and standing up to, these are government sanctioned. And so, but I think what's important is, yeah, there is a segment of the population that does support the government. It's probably relatively small and has gotten smaller, but there are people that still support the government. There are, I think, a vast majority who are very frustrated with this government. I just think what is most important then, because we don't have any, we're not there. It is not our job to say what the Iranian people want. But what we should be doing, at least at a policy level, is not attempting to be the puppet masters here and figure out, okay, if you want to hear Iranians, let's figure out ways to not block Iranians from access to the outside world. Let's figure out ways to make sure that our sanctions are not undermining Iranian civil society. Little things like that. But instead, this entire argument is so securitized, and the only tools that we have on the outside are these tools that actually make the problem worse. And so instead, we get these debates about, do Iranians like the government or not like the government? Do they want Reza Pahlavi or do they want this or that? And it's not up for us to decide. Let's put accurate information out there. Let's try to work in solidarity, but number one, let's do no harm as a primary principle.
Speaking of which, when it comes to the policy issue, by the way, I'm really happy you mentioned sanctions, because one thing that is completely left out of mainstream media coverage is the role of U.S. sanctions and playing a major role in harming and creating economic horrors for Iranians, which is, causing a lot of frustration to be, which is totally understandable. But in terms of policy, we're sitting here waiting for Donald Trump to decide, is he going to bomb Iran? Is he not going to bomb Iran? I think yesterday, all of us thought he was going to do it like last night. But it seems as though, at least based on reporting, that you have Gulf Arab states understandably advising him not to do it. Apparently, the Israelis also advise him not to do it, worrying that it would derail the protests. But also you see the administration, the Donald Trump administration, moving this U.S. aircraft carrier from the South China Sea to the Middle East, which is supposed to take a week to get there, which suggests possible preparation for, something bigger. I don't know what. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could happen. This administration is unbelievably unpredictable. But what's very clear is that Trump is surrounded by people who are all barking, yes, we should militarily intervene and do something. And I'm just curious, what's your read on the situation? I know you don't have a crystal ball to predict the future, but the U.S. does seem to be in a bit of a strategic dilemma right now, because it's either like, if you really want to go in and change the regime in Iran, as the Trump administration is saying they want to do, that's, it's a country of 80 million people. You don't do that overnight. But then Trump also wants to go in and do something quick and get out. And it's like, okay, so what do you see happening here?
Yeah, I do think that Trump is keeping his options open. His options actually have been limited, at least militarily, because he's busy changing regimes here in the Western Hemisphere. So the military assets are not there for a prolonged military engagement, engagement where Iran would likely not respond symbolically, but at a level much greater than it has in previous rounds between the U.S. and Israel and Iran. But I think so. First of all, I think the Trump White House Iran policy is filtered through, are we going to piss off Mark Levin or are we going to piss off Tucker Carlson? And so those are the policy, that's where the policy discussion starts. But look, I think Trump's inclination, I mean, God, I don't even want to, is to be a deal maker. All right. I mean, this is his tagline. So I don't think Trump actually wants to invest U.S. blood and treasure in a long, bloody war in Iran. And I think what has happened here is that the president was feeling good about taking out Maduro, saw what was happening in Iran, maybe had certain voices trickling up to him, Lindsey Graham, people he's talking to. And so he made this statement and drew a red line and compared himself to Obama, which means he's really serious, and sort of got out ahead of himself and then found out, well, here are the options. If you do a symbolic strike, there's a likelihood the Iranians retaliate, and it's not some cute symbolic thing, but it actually has real repercussions. If you want to do something bigger, well, we're going to need an aircraft carrier. We're going to need to be prepared to go big. If you want to do something small, non-kinetic, cyber, something like that, maybe that is low cost, but it's not sort of the symbolism that Trump wants to show of being tough and actually materially making an impact on the ground. So I think he looked at these options, and it seems clear to me that they've said it, they're back channeling with the Iranians. Trump is even sort of repeating some of the Iranian narratives about what has happened. I think that in his mind, this is all leading to, I'm going to get the Iranians to capitulate. I'm going to get them to cave on enrichment. Maybe even, I think there have been some interesting ideas put out. Crisis Group put out a report about, maybe diplomatic pressure around some of the human rights norms and things like that. Like maybe that should be a part of the conversation. I've been hesitant about that, not because I don't think that diplomatic pressure is important on those things or diplomatic prioritization, but just that I fear that that is then going to be used as a poison pill to try to undermine anything from moving forward. But we're kind of in a different context now. Thousands of people dead. Like, this is a horrible, solemn moment. And so I think we all need to be thinking deep. But anyway, I think that what this is driving out is he thinks he is just building up leverage to try to get a deal with the Iranians. But is very unpredictable. And so I also know that Netanyahu is at his heels, urging, Netanyahu met with him just a week before he made this tweet and got his endorsement for U.S. support for bombing the nuclear sites or bombing ballistic missiles. So we also know the Israelis are chomping at the bit. They don't want Iran to rebuild its air defenses. They don't want Iran to rebuild its nuclear program. So there's also sort of that competing timeline. And Trump is keeping his options open. I think he would rather not be, George W. Bush on steroids, but it may end up going that way depending on how things play out.
Mm-hmm. Jamal Abdi, president of the National Iranian American Council, thank you so much for being with us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.